All right, so let me ask you a question really quickly. What is your favorite Strat alternative? You see, just being a pop, rock, and blues guy myself, over the years, I've owned quite a few, and I think just in learning to do my research more and more about gear, I found myself dreaming about even more. But in doing that research, I actually found something interesting. I found something very specific with the Strat that I don't think Fender happens to be doing anymore. And today, I'm going to tell you what I think that is. You see, this actually all started a couple weeks ago when I was looking through some old Instagram pictures of videos that I happened to find of my early playing days. And like a lot of people, what I noticed was there was this unique blend of both the nostalgia and utter cringe. But even amongst all of this, one of the really cool things that I noticed was actually my Highway 1 Strat. You see, that was the first ever American Strat that I ever owned. I got it about 2.5 years into my playing career, and that Strat was really special to me because it was the first guitar where I learned pretty much every wannabe lick that I know now, from B.B. King to Mayer to Hendrix. I learned their licks on that Strat, or at least the simple ones that I could try to learn at the time. Now, while I loved that guitar quite a bit, about 4 years later, like an idiot, I decided to sell that guitar, and I actually used the money from that sale to buy my G&L Legacy that I use all the time right now. And while I love the Legacy, don't get me wrong, the Highway 1 in my mind sort of became the one that got away. And a lot of guitar players are familiar with that term, the one guitar that they just wish they wouldn't have sold. And while it was a fantastically built Fender Strat, it really was less about the build quality of the guitar in this instance and more about that was the guitar that I learned all of those riffs on, and that'll always be the guitar that I had those sentimental memories with. Now, while I will never underestimate the importance of learning those riffs on that guitar, there was actually one other core memory that really linked me to this guitar, and that was actually the cost. You see, like I was saying before, this was a Highway 1 Strat, which at the time was kind of their entry level into the world of American guitars when it comes to Fender, kind of like the American Performer is today. And at the time, because I bought it used, I got it off of Craigslist, I actually only ended up paying about $450 for this guitar. And while it did end up needing a full setup and a truss rod adjustment just to make it work, I just took it into the guitar store, paid a total of $50, and it was done. I had this behemoth of a guitar. Now, like I was just saying, you do have to take into account that this guitar was used when I bought it, but it's still crazy to think about the fact that not too long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you could get an American Strat new for probably $750. Now, I want to make this very clear that this is not my old man rant. Hot dogs when I was growing up used to cost a nickel. You can find that on my second hot dog channel. I understand that with the new technology that they're putting into some of this gear, and just with the general costs of inflation as the years go by, the prices were gonna go up. But in taking the time to actually want to think about those prices and think about where we've come, I started doing a little bit more research, and I found something quite interesting, and it actually has to do with Fender. I started to notice that once you start looking at Fender's Player series, especially once you get into the Player Plus and the Ventera 2s that just came out, you're looking at around $800 to $1,200. And when you go down to the next step below that, you're looking at like the Squires and the Classic Vibes, and you're probably looking to spend about $430 on the high end. And there was just this kind of gap that I noticed, that once you're going from the higher end of Squires to the lower end of like the Player series, you're going from like $430 to that $800 price range. And that's when I started going even more deeper down into the rabbit hole, and I found something interesting. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Sterling CT50 Plus. It's an S-style guitar and a Strat style alternative, much like the G&L that I was just talking to you about that I've had for all those years. It's got a roasted maple neck, a 12-inch fretboard radius, and interestingly enough, it's actually priced at $650, which is right in that gap that I was just telling you about that Fender happens to not be doing anymore. But outside of just being in that price range, there happens to be one other thing, one very specific thing that I've seen in this guitar that I haven't seen in any other S-style guitar that comes stock. And it happens to actually deal with the pickups. So let me show you. Okay, so at first glance, when looking at the electronics specifically for this guitar, it's nothing necessarily that interesting. You have everything you're used to. You have a master volume, a master tone, and that's a little bit different. But when you actually look at the specific pickups, you see an SSH configuration. Now, that's different than most of the regular SSS strats, but then you start to dig a little bit deeper into the specs. There's a spot for a battery pack, making these active pickups. Now, if you're like me and you're genuinely interested in guitars and gear, but you don't know the specifics as to all of the tech stuff and you don't know why active pickups would make that special, let me give you the rundown real quick. Essentially, when it comes to pickups, there are basically two types. There's active pickups and there's passive pickups. In a usual SSS strat, or in most strats ever made, you're gonna find passive pickups. Now, passive pickups are known for having a more traditional sound, and they're a little bit more straightforward than active pickups are. Now, the benefit you'd get out of using active pickups, they tend to be higher output, which means you get to eliminate a lot of the hum, especially interesting when you get a guitar like this with single coils, as well as active pickups have been said to have a little bit more sustain. And also, outside of the active pickups, there's one more thing that I seem to notice instantly that I've never seen in any guitar ever, not even just a Strat, except for actually one of the ones that I've owned. If the ladies and gentlemen of the jury could very quickly turn their attention to this master volume knob, as you can notice, it is a push-pull. Now, obviously you've seen switches like that before. I mean, every PRS I've ever owned pretty much is coil split or coil tap, but this actually isn't a coil split or a coil tap. This is a mid boost. And the only time I've ever seen it is on another Sterling that I own, which is the James Valentine signature. Now, recently, usually my instant go-to is the Helix, which I love. I love literally all the tones and I take it everywhere. But I do have some new neighbors who just moved in who seem to be a little bit less sensitive to all of the noise that I make than my other neighbors. So I think it's time that I try and mic this up for the first time in a while. I really just want to focus on hearing the active pickups in the room and hearing how different they sound in the moment. So today I'm going to use the R10. I would usually use the 121 in pretty much all circumstances, but to be completely honest and vulnerable, I lost the mic clip for the 121 and I don't want to risk breaking it. I just don't. Usually when I talk about a guitar, I try and make sure I've done at least some research, but with this one, it's not even in tune yet. You're actively gonna see the first time I'm ever playing this. Here's the thing, I definitely am thinking that I'm starting to hear a couple of the tonal differences between this and just the regular strats I play, but specifically when it comes to the sustain, I'm using a compressor right now, so you can hear a difference. But even if I turned it off, like it's still there and it still sounds really good. I was being 100% completely honest when I said I wanted to go mic'd out of an actual amp for this exact thing. But once I hit the high gain, once I hit the lead tones, I knew even my new neighbors who are a lot less sensitive to some of my higher volumes, I still want to be kind of nice to them. Also, tell me in the comments, plus 30 points to anyone who can tell me what that riff was from. But here kind of comes the big important thing, which is the mid boost and seeing how much it actually does. Here's kind of the big question I feel like is very much worth asking, and that's, what's the point of all this? And am I just here to tell you I'm basically here to crap on Fender, which is not the case at all. I think when you look back to that previous series that I was talking about, both the Player Plus and the Ventera 2. I hear nothing but great things. I think they're fantastic guitars. By the way, Fender, if you ever want to send over a Ventera 2, that would be nice. But I think the point of all this specifically is to say that when we think about alternatives, not just to Strats, but to any guitar in general, the first thing that I tend to think about is the A/B test. Like if I put this guitar up against the Fender Player Series or the Player Plus or the Ventera 2, which one would sound better? But I don't think that's all that alternatives can be. I think alternatives can be actually about finding different guitars that do completely different things. There are some things that you might like in a specific guitar that one might do better, but I think with the CT50 having the mid boost and the active pickup circuit, it's a completely different guitar than most Strats that I've ever played. And I did just have a bit of an epiphany because I said earlier in this video that I had never seen a stock Strat with active pickups, even though I have put active pickups in my Player Series Strat. And if you want to see that whole debacle, that was a very long process, please make sure to check out the link in the description. All that to say, I genuinely think this guitar is very different from most of the Strats out there. I'm very intrigued by active pickups and by the idea of being different, especially when it comes to this guitar, when I don't have to think about hum at all and I can still get the single coil Strat sound, but with a couple of variations. But at the end of the day, it really all comes down to preference. What do you want? What do you like? What have you played before? And what are you looking forward to? But it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you think. Have you played a CT50? Have you played a CT50 Plus? What's your favorite Strat alternative? Please let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. It was so much fun just to be able to check out the CT50 and to be able to see what active pickups sound like stock in an S-style guitar for the first time, especially in this room going through an amp. If you want to know anything more about this guitar right here, make sure to check out the links below. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I used in this video, make sure to check out those links. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic day.